My name is Marlene Thorne. After 15 loyal years at Verdance Labs, I was erased, fired without warning, my life's work credited to someone else. I felt humiliated, used, discarded like a paper cup. But something broke open in me that day. I didn't scream, I stood. And I told the truth, even if it cost me everything. If you've ever been silenced or overlooked, I hope you'll hear my story through to the end, then tell me, was I right to speak out, or should I have walked away quietly? I truly value your advice. It was a Monday. Dry air, overcast sky, and not even a hint of wind. One of those strange in-between days when you expect something to shift, but nothing really does. If I'd known what was coming, I might have worn different shoes. Something sturdier, something less hopeful. The office lights always flickered a little too bright that time of morning. Not enough to notice unless you sat under them for years like I did. You could hear the coffee machine sputter in the break room down the hall, an old model that groaned before it poured. Familiar, like a tired friend. I walked in at 8:02, same as always. I said hello to Randall at reception, who gave me his usual half-smile while fiddling with the badge reader. The halls smelled like lemon cleaner and worn carpet. On my desk, a sticky note from our new office manager. Talia needs you in Commons room at 8:30. Big team meeting. She even drew a little exclamation mark. I didn't need it. My stomach already had that quiet knot. The Commons room was half glass and half uncomfortable chairs. It had that strange coldness buildings get when no one means to stay long. People shuffled in, settling into polite rows, murmuring about weekend plans or how the traffic lights downtown were mistimed again. I sat near the end of the second row, habit. Easier to leave quietly if things went sideways. Then she walked in, Talia Vexler. New blood, slick blazer, expensive shoes, and the confidence of someone who always assumes the mic is meant for them. She clapped once, smiled wide, and began. I just want to say, this is a milestone. When I first arrived at Verdance, I knew this team had potential. And today, we're standing on the edge of something big. We've done it. The strategy worked. The market loves us. And that's thanks to bold vision, smart leadership, and knowing when to take a risk. She paused, beaming. People clapped. Some even nodded enthusiastically. I didn't move. She kept talking. About numbers. About success. About her decision to push forward with the Omega Line formula. She said it was her idea to pivot the positioning to stress hormone balance instead of weight loss. That this was the kind of agility investors wanted. And clearly we were right, she said. 14 months. That's how long I'd worked on that formula. My notes. My trials. My early morning calls with the lab team to adjust absorption rates. I even helped rewrite the ingredient profile when sourcing changed due to budget cuts. And yes, we'd all debated the hormone angle in meetings, debated until I finally pulled case studies that proved the shift made sense. She was there. She'd nodded, but she hadn't led. She'd followed quietly, then waited. She never said my name. People clapped again. Some looked around, unsure. One colleague, Paul, I think, shifted in his seat, glanced toward me, then quickly looked away like it might cost him something. I didn't blame him. People have mortgages. Kids. I just sat there, still, hands folded in my lap like they'd been stitched together. I wasn't shocked. I didn't feel betrayed, not yet. But there was a tightness at the base of my neck, like I'd been sitting in the wrong posture for too long. It wasn't just being left out. It was the way she said it, like I never existed in the first place. After the meeting, no one said anything. Not really. A few people patted backs. Someone offered Talia a coffee. I returned to my desk. The room felt thinner somehow, like the walls had shifted a few inches inward. I told myself maybe it was just an oversight. Maybe she had planned to mention the team later. Maybe there would be another meeting, an email, a recognition board update with names properly listed. Maybe. I told myself all of that until about 3:45 p.m. when a message popped up in my inbox. The subject line was, Notice of separation, position impacted by restructuring. I clicked it without thinking. Just another Monday, right? The email started with, We regret to inform you, and ended with final day effective immediately. I read it 3 times, slowly. The screen felt too bright. My chest was hollow, not heavy, just empty, like something had already left before I noticed it was missing. No phone call. No face-to-face. Just a quiet, tidy removal. I sat there for another hour, maybe 2. I logged out of the project system. I packed my tea mug, the small plant I kept alive despite the building's recycled air, and my notebook with the leather cover that Ezra once gave me. Everything else could stay. I passed the front desk on the way out. Randall looked up, blinked, and opened his mouth, but I shook my head once. That was enough. On the sidewalk, I stood still for a second. The air hadn't moved all day. Not a leaf fluttered. Not a flag waved. Just stillness, as if the city had paused with me. I thought, maybe I'd let this one slide. Like all the other little things over the years. Shrug it off. Start again. But then again, this one felt different. This one had a weight to it. And that email, it was the last thing I ever received from a place I had given more than a decade of my life. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked slowly toward my car, thinking only one thing. This isn't how it ends. Not this time. I must have read that email 5 times. Maybe 6. The words didn't change, but the way I felt about them did every time. We regret to inform you that your position has been impacted by a departmental restructuring aimed at increasing operational agility. Operational agility. Like they were describing a machine, one with old parts to replace. Not a person. Not someone who'd spent more than a decade showing up early, staying late, covering for others when they dropped the ball, and never asking for credit. I just sat there at my kitchen table, the laptop still open, the screen casting a pale light across the quiet. My hands rested on either side of my coffee mug. It had gone cold a long time ago. The truth is, I'm not the type who reacts. Not right away. I wasn't raised that way, and this job had trained it further out of me. You absorb. You adjust. You keep the peace. You figure it out later. But even still, that email hit different. I thought about the Sunday nights I spent formatting those damn reports. The days I skipped lunch to run check-in calls with the lab. The way I'd stayed on that Omega Line project through 3 leadership transitions and a vendor collapse. That formula was mine. Every part of it had my handwriting, my fingerprints, my gut instinct woven through it. And now, just like that, I was cut loose. Restructured. Removed for the sake of flexibility. There wasn't even a phone call. Just a name at the bottom of an HR form and a suggestion to contact IT for device return instructions. I packed up my things in under 10 minutes. Just a few folders, my mug, that little cactus I never quite killed. I left the rest behind. The plant was probably the only thing still alive in that whole department anyway. I wasn't sure where I was driving exactly. The streets were familiar, but my mind had gone somewhere else. I think I just needed to be somewhere that wasn't silent and sterile and glowing with fluorescent lights. So I ended up at Penny Brew Cafe. Same uneven tile floor. Same chipped corner on the menu board. The same barista who always asked if I wanted oat milk even though I never had. I ordered a tea this time instead of coffee, don't ask me why, and sat in the far booth by the window. That booth had seen a lot of versions of me. Deadlines. Lunch breaks. Job interviews I didn't get. And then he walked in, Ezra Callahan. It took me a second to recognize him. His hair had thinned, and he moved slower than I remembered, like the years had finally caught up. But that steady gaze? Still the same. He spotted me almost immediately. Walked over with that careful look people use when they're not sure if they're welcome. Mind if I join? I gestured to the seat across from me. He sat, folded his hands, and didn't say a word for a full 30 seconds. Then he looked me in the eye. Talia again? I didn't say yes. I didn't have to. Ezra had been through his own version of this. 5 years ago, he was squeezed out of a major firm after refusing to play politics with the CEO. He never badmouthed anyone, but the story floated around in quiet conversations. Someone who stood up for a junior analyst being scapegoated in a financial mess. Ezra didn't have a meltdown. He just vanished. Now here he was. Still quiet. Still sharp. I got the email today. I finally said. He nodded slowly, then leaned back. Funny how you can give 10 years to something and still be a disposable line item. I gave a bitter laugh. 15. His brow furrowed, but his tone stayed level. Let me ask you something. Have you thought about what happens when you let people like that rewrite your story? I blinked. What do you mean? He sipped his coffee. I mean, you know the truth. You did the work. You made the thing happen. But if you let them erase that, if you walk away without correcting the record, even just for yourself, you let them decide who you were. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Something in me was too tired to push back, but not too numb to hear what he was saying. We talked a little more. Nothing dramatic. Just small pieces of ourselves passed across a chipped table under the hum of old ceiling lights. Then, as he stood to leave, he looked back at me. Sometimes keeping your head down is just another way of letting them step on it. He left. I sat there for a long while, stirring a tea that had already gone cold. That night, I got a message from a friend still at Verdance. They didn't say much, just enough. FYI, they're giving her job to Chase Vexler. You remember him? I did. Talia's cousin. Or nephew. Or some flavor of family. The one who'd interviewed for an analyst spot last year and didn't get it. No background in formulation. No management experience. But now, somehow, he was sliding right into my chair. It didn't make me angry. Not exactly. It made me feel invisible. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It wasn't even about the credit. It was about the way they'd quietly removed me, like I was some loose thread on a jacket, and then handed that jacket to someone else, someone who hadn't earned a single stitch. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan that never quite spun evenly, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud. This wasn't about fairness. This was about dignity. A week had passed since the email. 7 full days of silence. No follow-up. No exit interview. No thank you for your service mug in a sad little box. Just gone. I wasn't sleeping well. My body went through the motions, brushing teeth, feeding the cat, checking the mail, but my mind kept looping through moments like a broken tape. I kept asking myself if I had misunderstood the meeting or misread Talia's intentions. But every time I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, something in my chest twisted like a knot. Then came the company-wide meeting. I wasn't supposed to have access anymore, but one of the systems hadn't removed my login yet. A leftover thread they'd forgotten to pull. So when the invite went out, I clicked the link. Part curiosity, part instinct. Like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurts. Talia appeared on screen at exactly 9 a.m., sharp as ever. She wore a deep burgundy blazer and that easy, photogenic smile that made people believe she was born to lead. Good morning, team. Today I'm excited to share the next phase in our Omega line expansion. She clicked to the first slide, then another, and another. Each one looked eerily familiar because they were mine. Same bullet points, same phrase I'd coined. Balance your biology, not just your weight. I'd written that during a late night in the office, fiddling with word combinations until it sounded just right. I remembered exactly where I was sitting. I remembered the sweater I wore that night. And now there it was in her mouth, credited to no one. She never said my name. Not once. She didn't say anyone's name. She talked in generalities. We, our team, leadership. But I knew which parts had come from where. The slide about stress response markers was lifted straight from a private deck I'd made for the R and D heads. The chart? Mine. The product angle shift? Mine. Every line on that presentation came from months of work I had buried myself in. It was like watching a stranger live your life, except everyone was applauding. And the worst part? No one questioned it. At least, not out loud. I watched names pop up in the participant list, people I'd worked alongside for years. I wondered if they felt the absence, if they noticed what wasn't being said, or if they were just relieved it wasn't happening to them. I logged off before the meeting ended. I couldn't sit through the Q&A. Later that afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It turned out to be someone from the old legal department, someone I'd always gotten along with, but hadn't spoken to since leaving. Their message was short. Hey, I thought you should know. The numbers and research you submitted for Omega Line, Talia used them in the investment deck. The one they sent to secure the Hirschman funding. She presented it like it was internal executive work. They pulled $20 million off that. I figured you'd want to be aware. I sat on my couch with that message playing over and over in my head. 20 million. My work had raised more money than I'd ever made in salary my entire career. They used my name in the legal documentation, internally, of course, but erased me publicly. No credit, no call, no acknowledgement, just a data set, rebranded under someone else's initials. And now I had a choice. Let it go. Start over somewhere else. Maybe this time I'd get a quieter job, a simpler one. Something that didn't eat my weekends and keep me up at night. Maybe I'd forget all about Verdance in 6 months and laugh about this someday. Or I could speak up. Tell someone. Write it down. Let the truth out. Risk being painted as bitter, disgruntled, difficult. Risk losing the goodwill of a whole industry that still pretended loyalty and silence were virtues. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was recognition. Not just for me, but for the truth. I wanted it on record that I existed. That I'd done the work. That I mattered, even if they didn't think I was worth a paragraph in their press release. But I was tired. Tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring at a mug from the company's 10th anniversary party. Verdance Labs. Growing forward together. Funny how easy it is to feel invisible when people decide you no longer serve a purpose. That night, I opened my laptop. I didn't know what I was going to do next. Not yet. But I opened the folder labeled Omega, Draft Materials. I scrolled through the slides, the notes, the early concept sketches. Then I opened a blank document. I just started typing. Not an article. Not a letter. Just the story as it was. My version. Because maybe the first step wasn't shouting. Maybe the first step was refusing to be silent. It was Ezra's voice that lingered in my mind that night. If you're going to speak, don't speak to them. They've got the tools to make your voice disappear. You need to find someone who isn't paid to stay quiet. He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. But I knew it wasn't an offhand remark. It was experience talking. Worn and sharpened by years of watching people like me be erased without a sound. The next morning he texted me a name. Caroline Mears. Investigative journalist. Midwest-based, independent, and not the kind who relied on PR press kits or company lunches. She worked with a group called White Lantern, just a few reporters doing long-form investigations into workplace abuse and ethics scandals. They had broken some serious stories in the past, things that made boardrooms very uncomfortable. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't looking to blow up anyone's life. I didn't want a headline or a lawsuit. I wasn't hungry for vengeance. I just didn't want to be buried quietly under someone else's narrative. That was it. I just wanted the truth to live somewhere, even if I didn't sign my name to it. So, I emailed Caroline. I expected some kind of process. A wait list. An assistant. But no, she responded within 3 hours. Her message was simple. Thank you for reaching out. I'm listening. That was the first time in weeks I didn't feel invisible. We scheduled a call for the following evening. Ezra offered to join if I wanted support, but I declined. This was mine. I needed to do it alone. Caroline's voice was calm, neutral, but not cold. She asked questions, smart ones, and let silence do some of the work. I told her about the Omega Line project, the missing attribution, the metadata, the investment deck. I offered to send files. She didn't rush. She didn't make promises. She just said, truth matters more than speed. Take your time. And if you choose to move forward, I'll protect your identity unless you tell me otherwise. I spent the rest of the night going through folders. I found the draft presentations, time-stamped emails, even the Slack threads where I'd shared formulas and wording revisions. I created a zip folder and labeled it, maybe out of habit, maybe out of irony. Not forgotten. I hit send. And then I sat back in my chair and exhaled for the first time in days. A few mornings later, I received another email. This time from a small wellness company based in Des Moines. They had an opening in product development. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Fewer people. Smaller pay. No office politics, according to the note.
Just a job.
A new start. I didn't delete the message. I read it twice. Then I opened a reply window. I typed, "Thank you for the offer. I'd be happy to accept the position." I paused. My finger hovered over send. But something tugged at me. Something I couldn't shake. Was I really ready to start over like nothing happened? Was I walking into peace, or just hiding again? I stared at the screen. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. It wasn't that the offer was bad. In fact, part of me wanted to take it right away. Get away from all the noise, breathe new air. Let someone else fight. But a quieter voice inside me asked, "And then what? Do you go back to being invisible again? Do you let them decide what your silence means?" I closed the laptop.
For now.
There's a cost to speaking up. Everyone tells you that. But no one really talks about the cost of silence. It's a slow, dull erosion. You keep parts of yourself tucked away, thinking you're being wise or mature. And maybe for a while that's true. But eventually, you don't recognize the shape of your own story. Later that week, Caroline called again. "I've reviewed the materials. They're solid. This is something we should pursue. We'll give you control over how much you want shared. I want you to feel safe." I didn't know what safe felt like anymore. But I said yes. And somewhere between that call and the quiet night that followed, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who gets replaced by someone louder. Everyone who's told they're not strategic enough when all they ever did was keep the lights on. Everyone whose name is left off the slides. I still hadn't taken the Des Moines job. It was there, waiting. But maybe what I needed wasn't a new title. Maybe what I needed was to stop letting other people edit my name out of the story. It was close to midnight when the draft arrived. I had been sitting on the couch, a blanket over my knees, the TV on but muted. Outside, Minneapolis was quiet, still and sharp the way it gets in the fall, when the air smells faintly of cold metal and dry leaves. I opened the file slowly. My hands weren't shaking, but there was something brittle in my chest. I didn't know what I expected. Something more clinical, maybe. Or something that reduced all of it into a few impersonal paragraphs, the way internal reports always did. But it wasn't like that. The article was nearly 3,000 words long. The title was a direct quote from the email I had sent to Ezra weeks earlier, when I was still sorting through what I felt. "I don't want my job back. But I won't let anyone erase the truth." That was the headline. Plain. Sharp. Unflinching. The body of the piece laid out everything. The Omega Line project timeline. The product development notes. Email chains. Meeting minutes. Screenshots of Slack threads. Even the original slide deck metadata, which showed my name in the file history, version after version, like a breadcrumb trail they never bothered to cover up. They hadn't changed a word. They let the truth speak for itself. And there it was, my name. Not hidden behind initials or a source close to the matter. Not blurred or buried in footnotes. Just there. Plain. Unmistakable. My first reaction was not pride. It was fear. What if they sued? What if I lost every chance of rebuilding my career? What if they called me unstable, vindictive, bitter? Every label used to discredit women who speak out past the age when people expect them to be quiet. I shut the laptop and sat there in the dark. My apartment hummed gently around me, refrigerator cycling, pipes tapping softly in the walls. The world didn't end. No lightning bolt. No breaking news banner. Just me, alone with the truth. And then Ezra's words came back, soft but steady, like they always did when I needed them. Silence isn't peace. It's a prison with the door wide open. I sat with that for a long time. The next morning, I didn't check my email right away. I took a walk. I made coffee. I read half a page of a book I wasn't really paying attention to. By noon, the story had gone live. It was published by a well-respected independent outlet, and within hours, it was shared thousands of times. Industry folks, ethics forums, women in leadership groups, HR circles. People were reading. And not just skimming, they were commenting. Not everyone agreed with it, of course. Some said I should have gone through internal channels. Some argued I was bitter about being laid off. But those comments were drowned out by others. People from all over. Some anonymous, some brave enough to sign their names. I worked under Talia. Same pattern. They erased my name too. Different company, same playbook. I've never felt so seen. It didn't take long for the ripple to become a wave. Within 48 hours, the story had made its way to national platforms. Not because I was anyone important, but because the truth didn't just belong to me. It belonged to everyone who had ever been quietly rewritten out of their own work. What stunned me most wasn't the reach. It was the flood of private messages. Some from former colleagues, some from strangers, all with a common thread.
Thank you.
Some shared their own stories. Some just said they were proud I spoke up. A few admitted they wished they had done the same when it was their turn to choose between silence and risk. Verdance didn't issue a formal response right away. They went quiet, deleted a few web pages, made a vague statement about honoring all contributors to product success that didn't mention me or the article at all. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was how much lighter I felt. Not happier, not vindicated, just unburdened. Like I'd finally set down a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying for years. I went back and reread the article that night. Not to fact-check, just to see myself reflected back with honesty. It didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel real. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to prove I belonged. I wasn't trying to get back what had been taken. I wasn't hoping someone would come around and do the right thing.
I had already done it for myself.
They may never say my name in their boardroom. They may never print a correction or offer an apology. But somewhere, my words existed now in black and white, public and permanent. And in that quiet truth, I found something louder than applause. I found myself again. It had been just over a week since the story broke, and life hadn't returned to normal, whatever that word even meant anymore. I wasn't sure what to expect after something like that. Maybe silence. Maybe backlash. Maybe a barrage of lawyers, or an inbox full of damage control. But what came instead was a phone call. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was calm, practiced, the kind of tone people in corporate governance use when they're walking across a legal tightrope. Miss Thorne, this is Mark Lunsford from the Verdance Board of Directors. I was hoping we could schedule a brief conversation. Off the record. Just a chance to talk privately about how we might move forward. I didn't say anything right away. He continued. We're evaluating several pathways to rebuild confidence both internally and externally. We've reviewed the article, and we take the concerns seriously. There may be an opportunity for you to advise on process reform or potentially return in a strategic capacity. If you're open to that. There was a pause, like he was waiting for a thank you. I didn't give him one. Instead, I said, I'm not interested. No pressure, of course, he added quickly. We'd simply like to understand your perspective. I exhaled slowly. Not irritated. Not angry. Just clear. I think what you really want is to borrow my credibility to fix something you never valued until it became a problem. There was a short silence, then a carefully neutral reply. I understand. If you change your mind, our door remains open. I thanked him, not sarcastically, just politely. Then I ended the call. I sat there for a few minutes, phone still in hand, looking out the window at the late afternoon sky. The clouds were that soft Midwestern gray, the kind that makes everything look like it's been desaturated. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even conflicted. I just felt done. It was the kind of done that comes after years of trying to prove you're worth listening to, only to realize your value was never the issue. It was their refusal to see it. A few days later, I received a forwarded email from someone I used to work with, still hanging on inside Verdance. No name, just a subject line. In case you haven't seen this. It was a leaked internal message from Talia. In it, she dismissed the article as inaccurate, one-sided, and clearly written by a disgruntled former employee. She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. She claimed the team had moved on, and that Verdance was refocusing on innovation. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel surprised. That's what people like her do. They shift. They reframe. They try to make you look like noise. But then something changed. Later that week, the board issued a memo of their own, not public, but it found its way to me. They were initiating a full audit of the past year's HR decisions, bonus allocations, and contract approvals. The kind of review that only happens when the people with money start asking hard questions. And then I heard, again, not officially, that Talia had been asked to take a leave of absence pending the investigation. She wasn't fired. She wasn't publicly shamed. But she was out of the seat she had claimed as hers alone. Not because I demanded it. Not because I threatened legal action. Not because I organized a campaign or called a press conference. Because I told the truth. That's all I did. No screaming. No spectacle. The story carried its own weight. The irony is, I never wanted her destroyed. I didn't even want her punished. I just wanted my work acknowledged, my voice heard, my dignity intact. But systems don't change because you yell louder than everyone else. They change because someone says what's been whispered all along, clearly, steadily, and without flinching. That night, I sat outside on my small apartment balcony, wrapped in a fleece blanket, listening to the city breathe. The hum of cars, the occasional shout from a nearby bar, the soft buzz of life continuing. I thought about all the women I'd worked with over the years. The ones who'd been passed over, stepped on, overwritten. The ones who left quietly like I almost did. The ones who were talked out of speaking up. And I thought, maybe one of them was watching this unfold. Maybe someone saw what happened and felt a little less alone. That would be enough. I didn't need Talia to apologize. I didn't need Verdance to hire me back or give me a plaque.
I didn't even need a headline.
I just needed to know that telling the truth mattered. And now I did. It was a Thursday morning when the email came. The subject line read, "Coffee?" Simple. No branding, no reply all thread. Just her name, Talia Vexler. She wrote, "If you're open to it, I'd like to meet." No agenda. Just a conversation. I stared at the message for a good 5 minutes before I even touched my keyboard. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, the part that still had a habit of looking for closure, clicked reply and typed, "Tomorrow works. Pick the place." She chose a cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place executives go to hide from downtown eyes. I arrived a few minutes early and grabbed a table in the corner by the window. It was quiet, with low jazz playing in the background and the smell of burnt espresso drifting through the air. Talia showed up exactly on time. She looked like someone who had slept, but not well. No makeup, hair pulled back too tight, like she didn't want to pretend today. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I nodded. Nothing more. She folded her hands on the table, looked down for a second, then back at me. "I'll be honest, I don't know how to start this." "You already did," I said. That made her blink. Maybe she expected a softer entry. Or a fight. "I read the article," she continued. "And, look, I won't pretend I agree with how it was handled. But I'll admit, some of it, maybe more than some, was true." She paused, watching me carefully. I was under a lot of pressure to deliver. I pushed. Maybe too hard. Maybe I didn't give enough credit where it was due. But you weren't always easy to work with either, you know.
You challenged me.
Sometimes you resisted direction. I could have responded with a dozen rebuttals, lined up and ready. But I didn't. I just said, "That's not a justification. That's a power play." She exhaled, leaning back. "Look, I'm not here to apologize for everything. But maybe for some of it." I finally looked her in the eyes, calmly. "Maybe you're right," I said. "Maybe I wasn't easy. But I was honest. And committed. And when you took my name out of the story, you didn't just cut me off professionally. You erased what mattered most to me. The truth of what I gave." She didn't say anything. "I don't need a victory, Talia. I don't need your pity. I don't even need an apology. I just need to not be made invisible." Her mouth opened slightly, as if to say more, but I stood up. "I think we're done here."
I didn't rush.
I didn't slam my chair or toss a dramatic line over my shoulder. I just left. It was over, and I felt that in my bones, not like an end that breaks you, but like one that finally lets your lungs fill again. Outside, the air was brisk and clean. I walked to my car without looking back. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. Hi. Is this Marlene Thorne? Yes. This is Jenna from Reclaim Pathways. Ezra mentioned you. We're starting a new mentoring initiative for women over 45 who've been displaced in the workforce. We'd love for you to join us. You'd be working with women trying to rebuild, not just their resumes, but their confidence. We think your voice could be exactly what they need. I didn't hesitate. I'd love to. No calendar juggling. No checking with anyone. No second-guessing. Just yes. When I hung up, I sat there in the parking lot for a moment. A quiet sense of purpose settled in, not the kind that comes with promotions or pay bumps, but the kind that roots deeper. For years, I had waited for someone else to say I mattered, to offer the seat, extend the invite, validate the worth. Now I wasn't waiting. I wasn't climbing back into anything. I was walking forward on my own feet towards something that felt honest. For the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel like I had to ask for permission just to be who I already was. After meeting Talia that last time, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no swelling music, no moral victory playing out in my head. But there was something better, a kind of lightness, like I'd finally loosened a strap I didn't even know I'd been carrying for most of my life. I spent the next morning in the back pew of St. Elora. The church was quiet, maybe a dozen people there for the midweek group. Nothing fancy. Just simple wooden benches, filtered light through stained glass, and the kind of silence that lets your thoughts settle into a whisper. I didn't go to ask for anything. Not forgiveness, not clarity, not reward. I just wanted a space where I didn't have to hold myself together. During the reading, the group leader stood and read from Romans 12 verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I sat there with those words ringing quietly inside me. They didn't sound like a command. They sounded like a release. I thought, God never asked me to become small just to be agreeable. He never said dignity must be traded for patience. He never said I had to make peace with being unseen. That was man's doing. That was corporate culture. That was fear dressed up like loyalty. About a month later, I heard that Verdance had held a closed-door board meeting. Not a public announcement, but word got out. Talia was officially removed from her position. No press conference. No farewell post. Just quietly gone. And Chase, the one who'd slipped into my chair like he owned it, resigned for personal reasons. Whatever those were, I didn't care to guess. Verdance released a bland statement about reaffirming their commitment to transparency and ethical collaboration.
They didn't mention me.
They didn't mention the article. Just a fog of careful language meant to say something without saying anything at all.
It didn't bother me.
I wasn't looking for a retraction. I didn't need my name up on some wall. The truth had already done its job. They knew now that silence didn't work forever. In the weeks that followed, I started mentoring part-time through Reclaim Pathways. I met women from every background, accountants, teachers, HR managers, most of them over 50, most of them carrying the quiet weight of being discarded too early, too quietly. I didn't preach to them. I didn't hand out 5-step plans or talk about bouncing back. Mostly I listened, and when I shared, I told them the truth. I wasn't brave. I was just done being silent. And when I finally spoke, I realized I wasn't just telling my story, I was refusing to vanish. That fall, I was invited to speak at a small conference, Restoring Professional Identity After 50. The room was filled with folding chairs, notebooks, and cups of coffee. I didn't use slides. I didn't rehearse. When it was my turn, I stepped to the mic and looked out at a room full of faces that mirrored my own, worn, wise, and still hopeful. I said, I'm not here because I won a battle. I didn't. I lost my job. I lost friends. I lost time. What I found, though, was myself, after years of trying to shrink down to stay inside someone else's box. I let the silence sit. Then I added, I'm not courageous. I just got tired of waiting to be seen. So I stood up, not to fight, but to be real. Not to win, but to not disappear. Afterward, people came up, not for autographs or photos, just to say thank you. One woman, maybe 60, whispered, "I've been carrying that silence for 20 years." That day, I walked home differently. Not taller, exactly, but steadier. A week later, I stopped by Verdance Labs one last time. I wasn't there for anyone in particular. I had a locked file box with some handwritten notes I needed for workshop. The receptionist was new, young, polite, and unaware of who I was. She asked if I had an appointment. I didn't. But the building manager remembered me. He buzzed me in, no questions asked. As I waited for the elevator, the guard at the front desk caught my eye. He gave a quiet nod. Nothing dramatic. Just recognition. It was enough. I retrieved the box and walked toward the front doors. The sun was just beginning to set. That golden light you only get in late October, when the air turns crisp and shadows stretch long. As I stepped outside, I felt the warmth hit my face, and I thought, I don't belong here anymore. Not because I was cast out, but because I outgrew the space that once demanded I shrink. That was the final truth. The doors closed behind me, soft and automatic. I didn't look back. Not out of pride, but because I finally had something ahead of me worth facing. Sometimes the hardest part isn't losing the job or the title, it's realizing how long we've stayed quiet just to belong. If this story touched something in you, maybe a memory, a moment, a silence you've carried, I hope it gave you a little space to breathe, too. Have you ever felt like you had to shrink just to stay? If this spoke to you in any way, I'd be honored to have you join me in the stories still waiting to be told.